Good evening, all. Welcome to our RAMANUJAN'S Institute. I will be guiding regarding your preparation of TCS TPS in our economics subject. So let's start. Basically, the main problem faced by students during economics preparation is lot of them have a fear of economy, that they haven't studied economics in their graduation, or they are from science background, or some are from science background, they haven't studied economics. So let me get it very clear. The civil service examination doesn't require you to be a master of economics. It requires you to have a basic understanding of Indian economy. There is a difference between economics and Indian economy. So Ramanujan's Institute has brought forward this course in which we will be building a basic understanding of Indian economy, and for that first we have to know a few things about economics. So what is the best sources to prepare our study material, to prepare ourselves for the civil service examination? The best sources, no doubt, are the NCERTs. But the problem with economics and CRTs is that they are a little bit technical. So most of the students, when they start studying the NCRTs, they get disheartened and score. They don't get very good idea about the economics subject and score very less in the GS paper. So basically, we have launched this initiative to build a foundation of economics based on NCRTs of class 11 and class 12. Building on this foundation, students can move forward to the standard sources such as Ramesh Singh, Shankar Ganesh, etc., and they can have a proper preparation regarding economics. So, in this course, we are planning to cover both the NCRTs comprehensively so that students don't have to prepare it on their own, and a proper basic is built on which they can further their studies on civil services. Is it clear? I hope it is clear. So, regarding NCRTs, there are 3 books. The 11th is Introduction to Indian Economy or Indian Economic Development, and the class 12th book consists of 2 parts, that is micro and macroeconomics. Understood? Now, what is micro and macro? And another is economy, more precisely Indian economy. So in academic sense, economics is the study, okay, the study of the subject, including formulae, theory, research, etc. This technical economics is studied by the students of economics only. Now, what is important for our studies? That is economy, that is the application. Okay, so if you see the previous year questions, or maybe of TCS, TPS on TPSC, there is very less question in TPSC and other SSCs also. Most of the questions recorded from economics portion comes from Indian economy, more so the application part, that is current affairs based, news based, and maybe a little static. But to answer those questions efficiently or correctly, a basic understanding of economics is required. Huh? And for that, economics is divided into micro and macro. From the terminology itself, microeconomics deals with the unit and macroeconomics deals with the sum total. For example, the economics of one single piece of shirt produce may be the microeconomics, but the total economy of the factory may be in the district or in the state or in the whole of nation comes under macroeconomics. So our point of view, the macroeconomics part and the Indian economy part becomes most important for our studies. Clear? And for more so, if you look into the syllabus, all the national income, banking, SEBI, agri sector, if I tear down a few parts of our syllabus, all those can be basically classified as a part of macroeconomics. So this is the study of economics, and most importantly, for our exam point of view, the application part, that is the banking part in Indian economy or national income of Indian economy, maybe budgeting, etc. This becomes important, or this is what we are going to study. So basically we are going to study the macroeconomics part of the Indian economy. If you can prepare this part only, also your 60% of your basics is already covered from this YouTube series only. From next, and if from this basic part you can build upon your further studies regarding your preparation. So we will be discussing all those parts. There's national income, banking, agriculture sector, industry sector, all those parts will be discussed in detail in future lectures. Before we delve deeper into our Indian economy part, a little history of Indian economy or the state of Indian economy, that is to clear? The state of Indian economy that is prevalent today. For that we have to study a little history of India. That is the not the whole history of India. That is history of India with respect to the economy. Clear? So India has been under British rule for nearly 200 years. That British era has played a major part in the development of Indian economy. That is today, more so it was relevant in the first half of the 20th century. So at the start of 20th century, if you can list out a few features of Indian economy. Okay, Indian economy at the start of 20th century. Few features, if I list them down, the first one is, maybe you can say, agri-focused. And next is unemployment. Then low manufacturing output. Per capita GDP very low compared to the world. Various other social factors we can write here, that literacy is very low, and our sixth factor may be life expectancy in majorly. Okay, Now, all those things can be attributed to two terms, that is colonialism and imperialism. Now, what is the difference between colonialism and imperialism? Oh, okay. In short, colonialism is that is the oppressor is physically present, and in imperialism, no necessary of physical presence. Okay. During the British rule, the British were physically present on Indian soil, and they were making policies to benefit British rather than Indian soil. Okay, so that is an example of colonialism. Now, an example of imperialism can be the current, loosely you can attribute it to the current US tariff scenario. That is, they are making policies, they are pushing policies which will benefit US rather than other countries which are economically dependent on US. Keeping aside India, let's say there are smaller countries, PNG, Papua New Guinea, or the Pacific countries, Pacific Oceanic countries, Micronesia countries, they are economically dependent on USA. So now USA is making policies so that it benefits US rather than those smaller nations. So that can be an example of imperialism. Physical presence of US is not required, but still the policies are such that it benefits US. Understood the difference between colonialism and imperialism? Now, these are the main reason of underdeveloped state of Indian economy at the start of 20th century. That is the early 1900 to 1950s. Clear? Now, if we think, what are the policies, British policies? British policies were such that, or the colonial policies were such that it had control over the export and import of India. So, what are the major export products from India? Basically, those were raw cash crops such as cotton, silk, both raw, wool, indigo, jute. Now, what are the major imports? Major imports were finished goods. That is cotton exported from India, then silk exported from India, then wool exported from India at very cheap raw material prices. Then they were processed in British factories, made into finished goods, and they were sold back to Indians at high prices. So this is a policy in which the British had a total and absolute control, and the Indian interests were totally disregarded. This led to the deindustrialization of India. That is our handicraft, handloom, medicine, etc. Each and every sector faced a decline under the onslaught of cheap British-made goods. Clear? So we can loosely summarize that the aim of the British rule was to procure cheap raw materials so that the industrial revolution in Britain can sustain, and the colonies provided a market for the cheap mass-produced goods. Clear? Basically, mercantilism. Okay. Now, the British disregarded in another point is the British disregard to Indian interest. Basically, that is British were totally uh, focused on exploiting Indian resources to the British gain. It is evident, more so evident from the fact that there was no calculation of GDP or per capita income in the 200 years of British rule from the government side. There was no GDP calculated, no per capita income calculation done by the British. More so, obviously, these calculations or these are the national indicators. These indicators show the growth of a nation or the development of a nation. So these are only necessary when the government is concerned about the development of its citizens. Obviously, the British considered us or the Indians as colonies rather than citizens. So they deemed it not necessary to calculate the GDP or the per capita income. So now when did Indian people become aware of these few things? If you could uh, recall, Dadabhai Naoroji was the first person to maybe loosely estimate the total GDP or the per capita income of India. Dadabhai Naoroji. Okay, and another person who was associated with this was VKRV Rao. Okay, the person is VKRV Rao. Dadabhai Naoroji gave us the idea drain of wealth theory. All those discussion I have done till now was basically a translation of Dadabhai Naoroji's drain of wealth theory. Now, to put more so in numbers, during 1900s to 1950, calculation by VKRV Rao, the India's real GDP output growth. Now, what is real and nominal GDP growth? It will be discussed in our national income accounting classes. For a few days, just hold your curiosity. The real GDP growth was nearly about 0.2%. 0.2%. No, real GDP growth was less than 2%. Less than 2%, and per capita income grew at a meager percentage of 0.5%. The growth rate of per capita. The per capita income, that is the income, the whole GDP or the GNP divided among the total number of citizens give us the per capita income. The per capita income in 50 years grew at a meager 0.5% per annum. Very low. And the real GDP growth was nearly less than 2%. So that is also very low at a time when the world was going at nearly 10% per annum. Clear? All those things. Now, if we discuss about the different sectors under the British rule, the first comes to mind is agri sector. Already discussed, agricultural sector contributed to nearly about 85% of the population. That is only 15 people out of 100 are not dependent on agricultural produce. Now, because of all this, there was stagnation. Now, what is stagnation will be discussed in our inflation classes. And there was low productivity, obviously. Now, why I have written this part specifically? This low productivity is due to various British policies. The policies devised by British imperialists to seek out only rent and not develop India. So if I were to discuss it in detail, what are one of the first or the major reason behind the low productivity of Indian agriculture can be said as the revenue collection methods devised by for example zamindari. What are the other two? Rayatwari, another is Mahalwari. Now what the British did, they introduced a sort of middleman in between the government and the peasants, so they outsourced the revenue collection duties. Now this led to a string of problems in the Indian agriculture sphere. The first and the foremost sphere is first was the taxation rates. The taxation rates were absurdly high. So what happened? The profits mainly went to the British imperialists and not to the producers. So what this did do? This disincentivized the farmers or the peasants to invest. For this reason, what next happened? No innovation. So basically, because of high taxation and the revenue structure was set in such a manner that most of the profits were siphoned off to the British imperialists rather than the producers. For this reason, what happened? The producers, that the farmers and the peasants, were disincentivized from investing in their agricultural practices, in their agricultural methods, so that they can increase their production. So basically what happened? There was no money left to the peasants to invest in their agricultural fields. Second is similar to this. This led to absentee landlordism. That is, the British what happened? The tendered off or bid off the or sold off the land to the highest bidder. So this what happened? Most of the cases, the owner of the land, due to that zamindari system, zamindar or the Rayatwar Mahalwar in zamindari system, what happened? The most of the zamindars were not even present near their land. For that, they couldn't see the actual condition of the soil, the actual condition of the peasants. They instead, what did they do? They appointed some other person on his behalf to collect the revenue. So what happened here? Here the farmer, there is another person who is collecting the revenue. Now here the zamindar. Now the zamindar paying off to the British government. So these two steps added extra revenue burden on whom? On the farmer. So this caused the farmer to be pushed into absolute or absurd poverty. Due to this reason, what was exploited? The next exploitation came to soil. First, the farmer tried to increase his produce. For increasing production, soil was exploited. Now soil fertility started to decline. Obviously, it was the obvious next step because there was no innovation, no scientific advancement, and for maximizing profits, the farmers were forced to crop only cash crops, that is cotton, uh, indigo, jute, etc. And this led to the decline in soil fertility, which in turn led to low produce. So this cycle of low production, soil fertility, and absurd poverty kept on going and going and going, and this caused a massive number of famines in India. The most famous famine being 1943 Bengal famine. If you are interested, search a term epigenetics. If you are interested, search it and ask me in the next class. This is loosely, you can study it with respect to the Bengal famine. It is not exclusive to Bengal famine, but you can loosely given some example. Now, what is the fifth point here? Now, this fifth point here also, next we can say that is, it compromised our food security. Obviously, from the famines itself, you can deduce that our food security was compromised. How? The food grains were siphoned off to feed the British armies fighting for Britain in the First and the Second World War. Majorly, 1943 Bengal famine was also a man-made famine. What Hitler did to the Jews, Churchill did to Indians. So this is the basic or the state of agriculture sector under the British rule. Next we will be discussing a few reasons which are still prevalent today. These things, all these things, that is the 5 points I've mentioned here, these are exclusive to the British period. That is, the British policies mainly focusing on exploiting Indian farmers. Now, some of the agricultural sector issues are still prevalent today. For example, first one is dependency on monsoon. Or we can say rain-fed agriculture, which is still prevalent today. Most of our agricultural practices till now are dependent on monsoon or that is the natural water sources. There is lack of irrigation, lack of drainage, and lack of other soil health practices. Now another issue that is still prevalent today, more so it was prevalent during the British time, was the input management. So input management, that is, for this thing present government is doing some such as soil health card, nano fertilizers, nano urea, etc. So these are the present government initiative, but these were not present during the British time, not pushed from the government because it was not simply not their headache. And simply the next is lack of investment from the government. Obviously, it was during the most neglected during the British times. Now little work is being done, more so, more is needed. So this is the state of agricultural sector. If we summarize, during the colonial times, the agricultural sector was mostly focused on generating profits for the imperialist, and cash crops were pushed, compromising our food security, our soil health, and the economic condition of our farmers and peasants. So this led to the economic downturn, that is poverty, unemployment, lack of productivity, and more so, most of our population, that is when the British left, 72.7% of our population was dependent on agriculture, and most of our farmers lived in abject poverty. So moving forward, the state of industrial sector. Remind you, during the early half of 20th century, that is mostly under the British rule. So if we write a few features of the industrial sector, the first would be, that is deindustrialized, mainly due to colonial rule. All the motives I have already discussed in classes: imperialism, colonialism, mercantilism. I am not discussing it again. Deindustrialized how? That is cheap raw material export, cheap finished goods imported at high cost. That is, for example, if I explain you with a little example, let's say cotton is exported at 2 rupees per kg. Now it is exported to Britain. If we keep into account Weber's theory of industrial model, we will be discussing it on economics classes, not on YouTube. I think it will be discussed mainly in our paid classes, that if a raw material is weight losing, or if a raw material is weight gaining, where this industry should be set up. The British completely disregarded this Weber's theory and set up the industry in so as to favor the British workers and to fuel our industrial revolution. They exported 2 rupee per kg. Now, if we keep in mind the Weber's theory, cotton or any fabric for that matter doesn't lose or gain weight during its production. 2 kg of cotton yields 2 kg of fiber. 2 kg of fiber yields a shirt or cloth worth 2 kilograms. So such kind of industries naturally should be set up near the market, or where the production is, or where the country is. But instead, to fuel their industrial revolution, the British, what did they? Exported cheap raw material from India to Britain. They processed those cotton or fibers in the British mills, and they exported it back to India at high cost. Now let's say, for example, if we convert it at 50 kilogram per kg. Now in this single cotton trade only, India lost out 48 rupee worth of business. More so when most of Indians were poor and couldn't afford the finished product. Understood what the British deindustrialization did to India? Now what was the result of this single policy? This single policy led to the decline of most famous clothes of the world at that time, say Malmal cotton, Dhaka muslin, etc. And Indian markets were filled or flooded with cheap British made factory made goods. So it caused, first of all, if we expand deindustrialization, first it made handloom workers out of work. Second, it made the service sector associated with the handloom workers, that is the maintenance of the handloom machine or the machinery industry with the handlooms, obsolete. With the single policy, the British killed two of our industries, one manufacturing, one services. Understood? Now, second point in deindustrialization, we can say that it led to the decline of handicraft industry. Obviously, handicraft industry products are made slowly. They cannot compete with the mass products that are produced in the factories, and they are also much higher in cost. Now, obviously, as the British flooded our markets with cheaper goods, India is a poor country where the cheap products are available. People will always buy the cheaper products. So, handicraft industry also declined. Obviously, all these due to low investment. One another factor we can write that, another point we can write, that is flawed import and export policy. All these things I have already discussed. I am just teaching you how to make up points in the examination. So flawed import export, next another, while the world was industrializing, that is the moving from primary sector to a secondary sector, that is manufacturing, India had no significant capital good industry. The British never invested properly in the capital goods sector of India. This led to the decline of India's manufacturing sector. Now, what are capital goods? It will be properly discussed in our discussion or our classes in the coming days. Now, after all those, the British had a monopoly of the export of India. Now, when the British first came to India, they had to come following this route, a long route. Okay. Now, what the British did, they built a canal. The British and French built a canal through Egypt, which is known as, obviously you all know, that is Suez Canal. Now, due to this Suez Canal, the British had a monopoly over this trade. Also, obviously, as India was the British colony, they also monopolized it through government policies of that time. You can also, if you could connect history, you can also see that the British Empire grew with the advent of Suez Canal, and after the Suez Canal was handed over to the Egypt, the British Empire slowly died away. A simple geographical thing, geopolitical thing, if you could connect correctly. So this was the state of industrial sector. Now, services sector, as you know, it was not much present, as it was not developed at the time all over the world also, but still it was a very minuscule part of the Indian economy at that time. So to understand the total economic development of a country, there is a model we should study. It is present in NCERT, I think, but you should keep it in mind. That is the demographic transition model. So it basically connects the population growth with the economic development. Okay, x-axis is time, y-axis is population. There are four stages. Let's say we have a population birth rate is same, death rate is declining. Now if we plot the total population, this is stage 1. I will discuss it in a little time, just bear with me. So basically this is known as the demographic transition model. I hope it is visible. The demographic transition model basically plots the population growth with time or the economic development of a country. Here I am discussing with respect to India. We can say that is at stage 1, the birth rate and the population rate, and the population is very low here, that is the country is still growing, still at the primitive stage. You can say compare with a country or a community, anything, but here at the first stage birth rate is high, death rate is also high. If we compare this with India with exact data at the start of the 19th century, the life expectancy of average India was only 44 years. Here, India, in between third and fourth stage, the life expectancy is nearly 70 years, if you can understand. At the first stage, birth rate is high, death rate is high, that is birth is also high, death is also high. Life expectancy here is at the start, at the 1900s is 44 years, and at mortality rate, that is per 1000 babies born, 218 died at birth. This was the condition. So you can say at stage 1, birth rate, death rate both high. In stage 2, due to proper government policies, social policies, due to advance in medicine, death rate is slightly declining. Okay, we can say attribute it to 1950s India. But birth rate is still high due to social factors, education, lack of education, and due to the early or primitive stage of the society. In the third stage, birth rate is declining, death rate is also low, which leads to life expectancy being of 70 years. And at stage 4, that is we are approaching stage 4 now as India as a nation, birth rate and death rate both are declining, or can be said at the lowest position. So this is the demographic transition model. This is basically in a stage in which different steps in which a country should proceed with respect to its population, so that the economic distribution is properly managed. Now, in geography or other classes, we can debate or discuss whether India has followed the proper stages of demographic transition. That is for another class. But what I am discussing here, why I am discussing demographics here, we have to understand that British were the first to introduce census in India. Census is also necessary to assess how India's population or how India's people are growing, and with respect to that, how we can make policies so that we can help our citizens grow properly. Now, the first census in India was done in 1871, and the second was 1881, and since that, every 10 years, India has been counting its population. Apart from the last year, that is 2021 census has been postponed due to COVID, and now instead of 2021, it has been shifted to 2027. So more so, every 10 years, India's census was done. Now, during or pre-1990, I have to share you a few data regarding population. That is the social data. Literacy rate. Literacy rate when the British left India was approximately total 16%. Among it, the male literacy rate was nearly 25%, and the female literacy rate was nearly 7%. Now understand, a country whose total literacy rate is nearly 16%. This literacy rate or the social factor led to a lot of the policy decisions or a lot of the constitutional mandates which have been done in our constitution or our founding fathers have intended our country to run. So this is also a major factor. That is, we can see here how demography influenced the polity of the country. If a simple example we can say, that is simple, our voting system, that is first past the post system. It is the simplest form of democracy that can exist now, but being simplest, it is also not the most perfect system to represent a diverse country as of India. So if you can look in our constitution, there is also a provision for single transferable vote with proportional representation. Now that complex system of election cannot be made clear to a population which has only 16% literacy. So for democracy to work in India, first at the grassroots level, that is that the direct democracy, for people to be able to choose their candidates properly or easily or without any confusion, that is first past the post system was implemented for MLA and MP selection in India. Now after, if you can see, when our vice president is elected or president is elected, we use our constitution mandates the use of single transferable vote through proportional representation. Now why? Because it is easy to manage electoral college of the president or the vice president, and they can be made sure of the selection process. But a population of crores cannot be made easily available or cannot be made easily aware of that complex democratic system. If I am just making you understand how the social factors also lead to the polity of a country. So this is a few data. The literacy, public health, obviously in demography we also have to discuss the public health infrastructure. The public health infrastructure was also at a dismal state. People were not able to address their health issues correctly. It can be seen easily from the average life expectancy, that is 44 years. Now, what was the occupational structure? Occupational structure, that is what percentage of the population followed what occupational practices. So obviously the maximum was agriculture, next was manufacturing, and the third was services. Now what that is, this can loosely be transferred into primary, secondary and tertiary. In detail we will discuss this in regarding our future classes. So basically agriculture was people dependent on agriculture amounted to 72 72.7%. The manufacturing sector accounted to 10% of the population, and the services nearly 15 to 20% of the population. Clear? This was the occupational structure. You can see at the start of the British period, agricultural dependency was nearly 85%. At the end, it slightly reduced. Now it is more so reduced. So clear? Now this occupational structure also suffered from a huge regional variation. Now what kind of regional variation? The policies implemented were different in different regions. If we can think, the Bengal or the Madras region didn't have very much didn't have policies which are very much conducive to the agricultural sector, but the western sector, as that area, that is the northwest frontier of the British Empire, was to be kept under the British. They more so invested in the agriculture there. So if you can still see the agriculture of the northwestern region, that is the Punjab, Haryana, Western UP region, is slightly developed. More so, Green Revolution is to be credited also there, but still, that region was always a little the policies are always favorable in that region. Now, regional variation was also there. Similar, so Madras Presidency, the present day Karnataka also was included there. Kerala, Tamil Nadu is obviously there. All those regions show a much higher manufacturing output. That is the percentage of population practicing manufacturing in those regions had shown a slight increase. But if I was discussing about regional variation, places in Odisha, Rajasthan, Punjab, etc., these three regions experienced an increase in agri labor. That is, Madras Presidency more contributed to the manufacturing, and this region contributed to the agriculture. Clear? So this showed a regional variation in the policies, regional variation in the demographic structure, that is occupational schemes, etc. So this was the end of the British era. Now, what were the infrastructural facilities? If there are people could answer, what were okay. So if I have to discuss infrastructure, the main policy was to serve the British purpose. Okay. The main infrastructure development, that is the rail, road, waterways, were all built to connect to mercantilism, that is to serve British purpose, to serve economic interests of the British Empire. So if someone says that the British were the ones to develop railways, roadways, and to connect all of India, so all those could have been done without colonizing India, without exploiting India also. India is developing bullet train with the help of Japanese, but in the entire history of India, no part of India was under the Japanese control, rather than the Andaman and Nicobar Islands for a brief period of time during the Second World War. So it didn't require, the development of bullet train didn't require us to be colonized by the Japanese. So that here the same or the argument that the British were responsible for the infrastructure development of India falls flat. That doesn't carries through. So they also did a few small infrastructure projects or canals, irrigation projects, postal service, telegraph service, all this mainly to serve the British interest in India. Postal service also, India couldn't properly use the postal service till after the independence. So this was the state of all the sectors of Indian economy during and at the start during the British rule and at the end of the British rule. Now, if we were to summarize the whole of the class today, or the whole of the period that was mentioning today, that is the start of British colonialism to the Indian independence. First one is agri-dependent. Agri-dependency of population 85%, and at the end it was 72.7%. Next, if I were to summarize, there was lack of proper investment, flawed export and import policy due to British monopoly, and in the demographics part, rampant poverty, unemployment, then illiteracy. All these three led to the welfare-based approach of newly independent Indian nation. Which to some extent India is still following through. So these are the four main points, and if I are to nutshell, there was huge social and economic challenges before the newly independent country of India. So now in future classes, we will discuss how this newly independent nation of India, or the Republic of India, broke through all those disadvantages, all the muddy history of poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, and now is among the largest nations in terms of economic strength, fourth largest or maybe third in terms of GDP strength, and I hope one day it will be placed much higher than that. So thank you for connecting to us on this live class today. We intend to complete the NCERT in depth and improve your basics so that you can move forward with your preparation with ease and with confidence for any other further queries, you can reach out to the institute. Thank you. এখানে যে এটা হইতেছে এটা পুরোটা যাইব নি, তুমি যতক্ষণ কাটবে ততক্ষণ থাকবো।